Hey, I'm Alex Colmer, the CEO of VidMob.
And hi, I'm Matty DeCastro, the VP of Growth and Operations.
And today we're going to talk about one of the more complex and interesting topics out there in the marketing world today, the topic of signal loss, what it is,
and a little bit more on what it means to marketers and consumers. So let's dive in.
All right, so Matty, first of all, great seeing you. A lot of discussion in the industry right now and over the course of the past probably 2-3 months especially on this concept of signal loss. What does it mean?
It's a fundamental change really to the technology and advertising ecosystem. Some of the big platforms are giving consumers the ability to actually have more say on what their data is used for on the web. That's primarily what signal loss is it gives the user of any of these platform or applications or interfaces more control.
With ATT, Apple's removing access to the IDFA. What's actually happening and how does this manifest itself for marketers?
So what the IDFA actually is, when we break it down, was the ability for a marketer or the A in the IDFA advertiser to track your experience across your usage of, say, a mobile phone. Now, with these changes, if you were to download, let's say, I'm a golf fan, a PGA Tour app right on your phone, there would be a piece of code, a pixel in that app that would track my user behavior. Now, when I download that app, I'll see a little pop-up that comes up and it'll say, will you let PGA use your data to track you while you're using the experience? And you can quickly say yes or no. So that's the brass tacks of really what's changing. What this means for marketers is normally when an app was installed on this phone, that was automatically assumed that they could track your usage on the phone. Now every user will have the ability to opt out of that.
So is everyone going to opt out, or is the thinking that some percentage will still say, you know what, I'm fine with this? Like, do you have any sense for where that's going to land?
Yeah, the initial data is, at least in North America right now, is the majority of people are opting out. But over time, I think that'll change because, giving data, whether it might be your phone number, whether it might be your address, whether it might be how you're using a platform, there's a value exchange between these platforms. And so as users get more used to this and this evolves over time, I think you'll see varying degrees of how that data is used. And I think users will, exchange their data in looking for some of that value creation. And so like when I think about it, I think about something like a DoorDash, right? Like in the pandemic, like I would absolutely give my address to them because they're gonna bring my family dinner. And that's how the value exchange, so I'm gonna opt in to that experience.
The marketers don't actually care about what I'm doing. What it comes down to is trying to understand who and what type of user is likely to actually purchase within that PGA app. Because ultimately, they're trying to target specific types of users who are going to be better customers for them. And so, as I understand it, really what this comes down to is it sort of, it'll make it more difficult to show ads to your best possible customers, so folks will just have to show them more broadly and sort of hope for the best from there.
The thing that'll fundamentally change, it'll just be harder to model the audience that are your ideal consumer, right? So if you're a person that, shops for X, Y, and Z on X, Y, and Z site, like your behavior in that app is one data point that they're looking at, and then they're appending that to other usage behavior or other attributes they might have to build an audience that they think is ideal to drive that, let's say, online transaction. Without the ability to track the transaction itself, like all of those other data points become a little less useful. Not to say they're not still useful, but I think marketers will have to look for different ways to actually be relevant to those consumers that they just can't find right away because they're looking at their behaviors.
Ultimately, I think it's fair to say that people really don't know what the extent of the impact is going to be. But at least over the course of the last few weeks, I think the feeling is that we're going to be able to get most of the way as marketers through sort of modeled data and basically looking at signals coming from that sort of 10, 20, 30% who are opting in, and then extrapolating that from there. Is that sort of how you're seeing it as well, or?
Yeah, from a marketing perspective, I would kind of think about it in two buckets. There's targeting and there's attribution. So from a targeting perspective, I think in the short term, it'll become a little bit more difficult for smaller to mid-sized marketers who don't have vast engineering resources to find the audiences that they care about in terms of targeting and then track that back to attribution. Now, over time, like this technology is built, and I think there'll be a time where there's some sort of happy medium that kind of provides this over time. That leads back to attribution. In the short term, I think there'll be a little bit more modeling of attribution versus actually knowing down to a smaller cohort of users, say like to the user or to a group of 10 that might be modeled out into a group of 1,000 or 10,000. But we'll have to see kind of how that transpires from an attribution perspective over the coming years. I do think the larger marketers who have more engineering resources will be able to connect the dots from server to server integration, which will replace some of that signal loss.
So short term, performance marketers probably will be impacted most, and I guess the sort of expected result is perhaps slight to potentially more significant just increases in cost of acquisition. The thing that I sort of find interesting just from sort of a broader philosophical basis is how does that opt-in rate change as people start to potentially understand better what the actual impact of it is? One of the things I think about is when I look at my own phone, I probably have somewhere between 200 and 300 apps on there. I've probably paid for 8 or 9 of them. Mm-hmm. So what that means is that all of those other things, the map software, the weather apps, like all these things that are frankly so central to my life, they're ad supported.
Right.
And so I think as people start to actually understand that so many of these things that they're getting for free exist because of that. And as they potentially start to see some of those things go away, I do think there will be an understanding that some of the framing here is maybe not exactly accurate in terms of what's happening.
If you look at a lot of your experience in these applications or your own usage of, say, a mobile phone, like a lot of the advertising, because of the targeting, was additive to the experience. Like, I'll just take Instagram for now. I'm wearing 3 things right now that I actually bought on Instagram because they were additive to my user experience.
Your beard and what else?
My beard, my graying sideburns and hair gel. But I'd be on Instagram between a picture of my nephew and a picture of my daughter, right? I might get an ad for something like Beltology, which is the belt, and I was like, oh, that belt looks stretchy and comfortable, and now I have 3 of them, right? But I wouldn't have been exposed to that if it wasn't additive to my user experience. So I agree with you. And also, big and small marketers are incredibly intelligent now, right? So I think they'll find new ways to reach and talk to those audiences. Creative is going to be even more important because the creativity that's flowing through any feed or stream you might be on between pictures or just content that's super relevant to you, like your children, will need to be additive to that experience versus disruptive.
Yeah, makes total sense. So it's probably the most potentially significant change as it relates to mobile and sort of broad-based digital advertising for a long time. And I think one of the things that's been sort of most interesting for me is just how much uncertainty there is around such a big change.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's what's causing the fear. There's almost been a little bit of an alarmist tone around this. I don't really see it as that. It's more just a fundamental evolution of the ecosystem. So the value exchange between the consumer, the platform, the technology provider are all a little more equal versus, I have to opt into this to get X, Y, and Z. And I think we'll see that sort of value exchange continue to evolve. It's not going to happen overnight, right? Like this signal loss and deprecation of cookies will happen over, even though Apple's made the changes, Google's made some changes, it'll be a slower burn of that attribution and targeting deprecation. And to be honest, like we'll just sort of have to see how it plays out, but it does provide a huge opportunity. I don't think it's news to anybody that creative is driving 2/3 of performance in all of marketing, particularly digital marketing, and I think will become more important.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly one of my takeaways here is that, you know, in a lot of ways, it sort of never made sense to me that so much of the marketing lift relied on the audience optimization and targeting, when, you know, creative seems like it was sort of overlooked, and you know it feels like now creative is going to have its day. People are sort of realizing that this component, which kind of was always driving, you know, 2/3 or more of the actual results, is now going to be sort of more important than ever, as you know that sort of other lever potentially loses, you know, somewhere between some or a good portion of its overall efficacy.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think there'll be new opportunities too to tie creative performance to attribution performance, whether that's selling something online, acquiring new customers, or just driving brand awareness and love. And that will be an interesting metric that will continue to evolve over the next, you know, 24 months.
I think one of the other most significant changes that's happened in sort of advertising and communications more broadly over the course of, you know, the last ever is the rise or birth of this sort of concept of intelligent creative. I guess around sort of 4 years ago, machine learning and AI started to get to the point where, you know, computer vision, optical character recognition, natural language processing, a bunch of these sort of very different ML technologies could actually sort of programmatically unpack and start to understand the creative attributes of content. So if you think about it, like every video, whether it's a, you know, 5-second, you know, Instagram ad or a longer form, you know, piece of, you know, content on YouTube, is just a procession of frames. And in each of those frames, there are many things happening. So, you know, an actor or actress might be looking left or right or straight at the camera, and that gaze, it may be, you know, very engaging in certain cultures, but aggressive and off-putting in others. You have logos and trademarks that could be in the upper right corner, or the bottom left, or zooming in, or you know, or hidden in sort of a low color contrast. You have, you know, words showing up in different fonts and you know, pacing through either comfortably at a comfortable reading pace or fast, you know, quick. You know, you have, you know, spoken words happening in the background and calls to action and emotions being exhibited by the actors and actresses, and on and on and on. And all these things are increasingly data. And so what we've seen is a rise of technologies, including what VidMob has, you know, really helped kind of pioneer, that enable marketers to quite easily unpack everything that's happening inside their content, and then compare that to the resultant behavioral signals. So, you know, upper funnel, you know, view through, you know, and other kind of engagement metrics, all the way down to, you know, ROAS and purchases and other sort of, you know, real kind of lower funnel metrics. And so, when combined together, what we see is that we can actually start to, for the first time, not help marketers understand which ads are working, because we know that data exists everywhere. But we can get to something that's never been there, which is why. Why was this ad working last week and it's not working this week? Like, what changed in culture that my spend is now being wasted? And maybe more importantly, what can I do? What should I do? Or what should I experiment with that might combat that and make it work again? And so, you know, yes, you know, we're going to lose some signal. Yes, there's going to be some negative impact from this, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see the balance, the benefit of, you know, this sort of intelligent creative movement far outweigh the negative of the signal loss. And that's what I'm excited about.
I couldn't agree more with you, and it's just better for everyone, right? Like, if you have better creator, you have a better user experience when you're using these interfaces. You know, when you're accessing different things, like, and then the platform is having a better experience because their content is better within the platform. I mean, who doesn't want better content, like, in their user experience? And it'll just be time in this evolution of digital marketing and how it plays out over the next year or two.
All right, well, I'm Alex.
And I'm Matty.
It's good. I thought for a second there I might be Maddie, but you're Maddie. All right.
I'm Maddie.
All right, yeah, good. Well, I'm Alex, and listen, I hope this conversation was helpful. We touched on probably a small fraction of what the subject actually contains. The good news, though, is that VidMob has created a pretty incredible resource in our Digital Marketer's Essential Guide to Signal Loss. It's free, and you can click the link below, download it, and hopefully that'll be another tool to figuring out how to market successfully in this ever-changing environment.
And thank you for your time today.